So to you, Helet, I know you wanted to respond. I know you were listening to Suhasini carefully. Is there any chance of any country mediating that can still pull Israel a little bit away from the precipice, or is this now a done deal, in your estimation?
Well, first, I have to say about the little innocent child that was murdered in the United States today, that
Yes.
is deplorable. It is no different than any murder of any child. Children are children. It's disgusting. And I have no other words. And certainly it doesn't matter who's to blame. It's just tragic and should never happen. Um, I also want to make sure that my words before are understood precisely. There's a big difference between retribution and vengeance and retaliation. Those are different things. I, unlike what we hear the descriptions of, am not encountering so much a desire for vengeance. I am encountering a true fear for survival from people, many, many people whose very basic sense of security has been ruined completely. And what we are asking, what the people are asking is return that sense of security. We have let something grow on our border that is so large and is so evil that we cannot live with it anymore. And a lot of what I've heard on this panel, I understand the sentiment. But here's the message you are giving Israel: be nice little victims. It's true, you've suffered terrible, terrible atrocities, but you can't really do so much about it because we don't want to involve Egypt, and certainly we don't want to involve Jordan, and we feel this and that. And once again, I do not ever want to target civilians or harm civilians. But at the same time, it needs to be understood Hamas will be eliminated. And I want to make sure we understand it's not a matter of 24 hours. It's this notion that we're saying of 24 hours and get out is simply not true. The IDF spokesman specifically addressed this and said, we understand that this is not a 24-hour situation for people to move and find safety. That's not even the issue. We have the time and we have the stamina, but the notion that we will not respond in a way that eliminates this threat to our very survival is not a realistic notion whatsoever. And I agree with whoever it was that said the international community absolutely come in, find a solution. Don't ask Israel to be the solution by continuing to be victimized. There is no country that has done this. And when we're talking about other countries who are fighting wars, I certainly look at what happened after 9/11, and I don't think those same standards that we are being asked to employ were employed. That doesn't justify going out and trying to kill civilians, but we never do that. We never target
Yeah.
civilians. We never celebrate their deaths. So you asked me, are we still at the precipice? Absolutely. But one last thing, the people being held by Hamas, who were kidnapped, hijacked, whatever you want to call it, they are the top of our minds, and they are certainly top in the calculation how this would work. So we would have
Yeah.
to see some extreme moves from Hamas before we can even talk about thinking about how to calm down these flames.
Yeah, I think the last time you and I were talking, you said we're a country of lions. So I don't think anyone is expecting Israel to play the role of poor little victims. That is just not in Israel's DNA. Bradley, do you want to add to what you've heard so far? But also, what Suhasini pointed out is a little bit of Biden's shifting position in the United States. Would you categorize it as that?
Well, I would just add that Israel has well, not the right, but the responsibility to protect its citizens. Well, as any state in the world has their primary responsibility is to its citizens. It's their safety, and we cannot forget that in 2005, Israel withdrew from the Gaza Strip in an attempt for peace to create a Palestinian state. And by doing so, they withdrew uh, uh, thousands of Israeli Jews from the Gaza Strip, uh, including graves, entire families, all in the interest of creating a Palestinian state in Gaza and leaving behind hundreds of millions of dollars worth of uh, agricultural equipment, greenhouses, all ready for a Palestinian
So are you
economy.
are you advocating a new
I,
occupation? Are you would you be in favor of that?
I it's not in Israel's interest to go back into Gaza. It hasn't been in their interest, for decades. Since in 1979, Israel attempted to hand over control of the Gaza Strip to Egypt in a peace agreement when they withdrew from the Sinai Peninsula, and Egypt said no. And it seems to be a common theme in that Egypt does not want any responsibility for their Palestinian Arab brothers in Gaza. So that is simply not an option. At least from my understanding, it's not Israel's. Israel does not want to go back into Gaza, but Israel does. Israel needs to do what it has to do to destroy Hamas once and for all. And Hamas can end this, simply by doing. I would implore on Hamas's morality to lay down its arms, to let the prisoners go, and surrender to Israel. They can end this all tomorrow.
Well, I don't see that happening either, though Qatar is urging Hamas to release.
Every innocent Israeli and Palestinian will be on their heads, not Israel.
Okay. Qatar is urging Hamas to at least release hostages. There's been no movement on that either. General Hassan, Helet Barrel said, do not expect Israel to be the solution. I want you to respond to that.
Well, absolutely. First of all, whatever Helet has said, let me tell you, it's out of a lot of emotion, a lot of sentiment. And if any of us were in this situation, as military people, we would also react in the same way, right? And therefore, whatever she has said, I support, back her completely. The dastardly manner, the brutality which was used, if I would just use this argument that if Hamas had just targeted military objectives, used military means, perhaps to do what they were attempting to achieve, perhaps the world may not have responded like this. Even the Israel may not have responded like this. But the manner in which they chose to do it, the brutality, the terrorist strategy which they adopted, made it an open thing for them to that Israel would do what it is wishing to do in the very near future. And I would be the happiest to see the end of Hamas out here, because I think Hamas are the villains of the peace in this entire situation. But having said all this, Barkha, I just wonder whether 10 days, 15 days, 20 days later, military strategists in Israel would be rethinking. Because, we need to argue this out. We need to look at it pragmatically to see, is this going to lead to a solution for Israel itself? Does it expect that it will get rid of the last Hamas terrorists in this area without the final occupation of Gaza? As was just pointed out also by Bradley just now, I think, that the whole problem is you can't just go in and occupy Gaza. This problem will fester forever. And therefore, as I said right in the beginning, it's such a complex issue. There are no solutions to it. At the moment, what we are seeing is just a progression of events which are natural. I use the word retribution not negatively at all. My use of the word retribution was positive. And I look at it from the angle that I would use retribution myself, because I think it is necessary to do it. When you lost civilians, when you lost children in these kind of dastardly actions which terrorists have carried out, you are fully justified to carry out those actions. So my explanations are very clear there. At the end of the day, my only advisory to Israel and Israeli commanders, be careful of other borders. You see, your concentration on Gaza is just a strip. It's a very small area in southern Israel. This conflict has the potential to expand much beyond. No one wants to see that happen. Israel will not want to see that. How to limit this conflict only within the boundaries of Israel at the moment is the most important thing.
Absolutely. I think no one would disagree with that last comment. So Hasni, go ahead. Last thoughts.
Well, I just feel the next few days will tell us what is going to happen. You'd asked for an international perspective on what we are seeing, and I think that's what most people are worried about. What General Hasnan said, that we are living in a time of many multinational conflicts, and while we see the operations being set up for Gaza, for a ground offensive, we can already see that there are going to be international repercussions. Now, Israel's forces may not really be worried about that, because right now their aim, as it was, when you remember that multinational coalition against ISIS was just basically to try and eliminate Hamas. But there is a collateral damage that we are seeing. There is civilian casualties that we are already seeing. And I think it's necessary to make the point that, as the Ministry of External Affairs has, that international humanitarian law, it's not just about the rule of law, but international humanitarian law must be preserved.
Daniel, last thoughts. You have been conflicted. When we last spoke, you said you find yourself in a terrible dilemma because you want something to happen that deters Hamas from ever daring to do this again. But then there's a red line you don't want your country to cross. Go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah. When I looked at the, the footage of you in back of the armor and the artillery, my first association was I have relatives and friends in those tanks, and I pray for their safety. But I also pray that they will not be called upon to do things which will cause unnecessary suffering on the Palestinian side. I trust the commanders of the Israeli army to do that. I do not trust my prime minister, but I think that the military will be able to handle that. I do want to end with something. There's going to be a day after. This will wind down. I don't know what the exit strategy is. I don't know what it will look like, but I can tell you this. Each people glimpsed something of their traumatic past. When we in Israel heard live on television, women calling television anchormen live and saying, we're barricaded behind closed doors with our children, the terrorists are outside, please send help. Most Israelis thought of the Holocaust. So Israel is not in danger as we were in the Holocaust, but those memories, the Holocaust is a contemporary Israeli collective memory. But when I see 1 million Palestinians heading south under instructions from my government, I know what they're feeling, even though I'm not Palestinian. This is a recreation of the Nakba. That is their formative experience as a people. They fear displacement. I am delighted as an Israeli that the Egyptians are not allowing them. They deserved to live in their own land. The day after the war, we're going to have to take a look around and say, what the hell can we do? I can tell you one thing. Life in Israel will not be paradise if life in Gaza is hell.